The clock has struck 5:30, so call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Director Hodeschel.
Thanks. Ready? Salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right there.
Who's in charge tonight doing that?
I'll take care of
okay.
that.
If you could do the roll call.
Will do. Director Gore,
Here.
Director Reedy,
Here.
Director Landon,
Here.
Director Holdeshell,
Here.
Chair Halden.
Here. Great. And if you could read the Statement of Meeting Procedures.
Welcome to the Western Placer Waste Management Authority meeting of March 12th, 2026. Agendas are available on the table outside this meeting room. If you're here to speak on a matter not on the agenda, you may do so during public comment. The board is not permitted to take action on items addressed under public comment. All items on the agenda will be open for the public to address before final action is taken. Accessibility information is provided on the meeting agenda. Please turn off or put in silent mode all cell phones and other electronic devices. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you. We'll move to item 5, which is public comment. This is a time when people may address the board regarding items not on this agenda. It's requested that comments be brief since the board is not permitted to take any action on items addressed under public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make a comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item 6, announcements and information. We'll start with 6A, the report from the general manager.
Thank you, Director Halden. A few things to update the board on. First and foremost, I want to introduce Brittany Ward, our new employee, WATMA's new employee. She's the business operations specialist. Just a small snippet of what Brittany will be doing is working with each department to improve some processes, to work on policy documentation. Brittany will also be serving as clerk of the board, so this is her training run, and next month she'll be running the show. So welcome, Brittany. We're glad to have you. We held an out.
Wait.
Yeah.
You
Want to give her?
I want her to give us
Awesome.
her LinkedIn profile.
Turn it over to you, Brittany.
Well, yeah. Where'd you go to school?
I'm Brittany. I'm from Rockland.
Woohoo.
Oh, well. All right, that's enough. All right.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yeah. Your maiden name is Halden? I mean,
Oh, I'm from Rockland. I have a son, and yeah,
And you went to Sac State.
I did. I went to Sac State many years ago.
degree in business administration or organizational management? Or,
Communications, marketing.
all right,
So, yeah.
great.
Well-
A Wildcat, or what's the other? Yeah, Thunder.
Did you go to high school in Rockland? That's what he's asking.
I went to Woodland Christian High School in Woodland, so
Okay.
kind of by Davis.
All right, thanks.
We can't
for-
squeeze a single Roseville thing out of her.
She shops at the Galleria. You're good.
Yes,
Well,
we all do.
Welcome to your hazing.
All right, thank you. We held a renewable Placer open house, which is the rebranding of the odor workshop, on February 26th. It was well attended. There were roughly 50, 60 people here participating in some of the things you can see back there. We're getting their feedback, and the bus tour was very well received. It always is. So it was a fun event. We are currently undergoing the SB 1383 audit, which is required by CalRecycle. It's a 10-day audit. We're roughly halfway through it. A third party, independent third party is doing the audit. And obviously the goal is to show that you're diverting 75% of the organic material from the landfill. Staff from CalRecycle was here observing the audit. We received very good feedback from what they saw. We will update everyone as soon as the numbers are out, which won't be too long after the audit is completed. But so far things are going very well. So that's good. We hosted a discussion and a tour with the Plastics Industry Association. Ivy Britton, thank you, Director Howdeshelt, for making that connection. That was yesterday, and there were some senior level Cal Recycle people there. There were a lot of SB 54, the plastics initiative, discussion about how we can handle it. There's also a significant amount of grant money available for that, so we started those discussions, and it was a very good event. It went really well. We are submitting, Stephanie's not here, but she's in the process of getting everything ready to submit the final grant reimbursement. We're expecting roughly 1.5 million of the, I think was originally 9.8 or 9.9. Overall, we will receive about 500,000 less, and that's due to timing of the construction. It just needed to be completed by a certain time. So all in all, it's a big chunk, but not quite 100%. And that's coming from Cal Recycle. Upcoming Trash Bash on April 25th. It's a great event, so that's always well attended. Hopefully some of you guys can make it out. And the Circular Economy Innovation Competition, April 29th. I know Emily will go into that a little bit more later, but that's always a great thing as well. So that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And if I might just add, so Ivy Britton and I used to work together at Northern California Water Association. She did legislative affairs for us, and then she moved on to the Plastics Industry Association. So, gosh, it was a warm day when she came out here, right?
Yeah.
Her first week into the job, and I entered, she Emily walked her around, and so I was pleased to hear that resulted in some more circular economy.
Yep.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
All right. We'll move on to item 6B, financial reports.
Okay, I'll do a quick update for you guys on the finances. So we're on the budget to actual. So on page 3 here, in the upper section, you'll see the revenue. So just a general note, revenue is favorable to budget by about 6.1%. Revenue is trending overall similar to what it has in previous months. So I won't go over in detail or highlight any of these comments, but I will say that there is something new. We do have a fair market value adjustment impacting, which is a debit to the revenue this month, and I can go into that a little bit more if you'd like. I do have a note here kind of describing what's happening. Would you like?
You've tempted me. Go
Yes.
ahead.
Okay. So, so this entry is done by Placer County. It's a reversal, because they handle all of our investments. It's a reversal of the fiscal year 25 fair market value adjustment. And the reason why they're doing that is to make it easier to book it to market at the end of this year. And I did ask them, hey, can you just do that in June so we don't have a funny debit sitting on our books for the next 4 or 5 months? And they said no. So,
Okay.
but yeah, so that's what that is. Is there any other questions on revenue? Would you like some?
Any questions?
No? Okay.
Okay.
All right, moving on to expenses. We're also here, no significant differences from last month's when I gave the update, with the exception of, well, I will say we did fix the MRF operations thanks to Director Reedy's question last month. So if you look down a little past midway down the page, we have our largest budget item in the expenses of 29 million, roughly there. The year-to-date budget is showing 17 million, and we found that that wasn't including HHW costs. So our model didn't have all of the costs associated in it with it, so that's why we were trending off a little bit last month. So if you look all the way across the board, comparing that 17 million to our actuals, we're only different from what we had budgeted by 2.1%, which actually trends really well and nicely, showing against our revenue, which is up 2.8%.
Stands out like that.
So it trends well with the tonnage there. So Is there any questions on the expenses side or anything else on the financials?
Any questions? No questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to item 6C, the monthly tonnage reports.
Yeah, good evening, Chair Halden, Board of Directors. Before you have the monthly tonnage reports for the fiscal year through the end of February. So of note, special note is the MSW tonnage. You see that it was a fair amount below our projections, and this can be attributed to two items. We saw slight systemic drops across all our jurisdictions on the tonnage brought in for the month of February. And then also working with FCC as the new system gets operational and integrated into the overall operations with the MRF and C&D. There was a reclassification of historical MSW type material from your like Junk Kings and similar businesses like that, predominantly cash customers, to C&D, identifying those bulkier materials as better fit to be processed through the C&D facility versus the MRF. So that reclassification moved them out of the MRF bucket and into the C&D bucket, which also contributed to that drop. Looking at the numbers for March, as of today, we are trending back in the right direction. We are tracking it very closely. But overall, we're looking strong on tonnage, and as been discussed before, when our inbound tonnage is down, our cost is also down. So it's kind of weighs itself out that way. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the tonnage.
Okay. With that exclamation noise out there, any questions?
Yeah, could you talk about the green waste tonnage? Is that,
Absolutely. So on the third page, green waste tonnage is pretty much, oh, sorry, that's food waste.
page
Yes,
seven?
it's still on the third page. So green waste tonnage is also down. February is historically the lowest month of green waste tonnage for us. All the storms have shaken the leaves off, and we're not hitting spring growth yet. That is going to bounce back very strong with 90-degree weather next week anticipated. So we'll shoot back up and head to our peak of the springtime and summer months.
And so you wouldn't attribute that to the green waste facility being closed during the week? Go ahead, Scott. Or Eric?
No, I think it's more seasonal. So just where the public dumps their material during the week is at the Z-Wall instead of the normal area, which is changing back on April 1st. We had a resident of Roseville that had some issues with that location, understandably.
Great, okay, thank you.
Okay. Any comments from the public on any of these items so far? Okay. Next, 6D, operator update. Hello, Mr. Tony.
Good evening. So for this evening, I'm going to start off by thanking Jesse Stratton. He stood up here a month ago on our behalf. He has been our marketing and public relations or public receiving area manager. He has decided to pursue other career opportunities, and so we wish him the best. Jesse, if you're watching, thank you very much for your years of contribution and for helping us serve the public here at the WAPMA. With that being said, we have begun a bird netting project within the MRF to help us prevent bird infestation within the facilities. And Ryan, I'll apologize if you're going to touch on some of this. Roll-up doors have been replaced at the MRF. There's been 4 roll-up doors that'll help us mitigate any odors. And then we've also gone through and scrapped old walking floors from the site, previously by the old inerts. We've also added 3 new fleet on site to help us manage the transportation of materials, and 4 more trailers are expected on the way this summer. Late February, we did encounter some issues with our MRF. Unfortunately, our shredders took quite a hit with some large metal objects. Luckily, we had a temporary shredder, mobile shredder put in place, and it helped us maintain some of that material along. By the end of the week, we recovered with the shredders, and we're back to normal. And with that, we do anticipate the facility expansion to be completed by the end of July. And this was a question that I was asked and wanted to get clarity around that. Then as Scott alluded, SB 1383 audits have commenced this week, and we are looking significantly better than the prior quarters. So very excited at the end of these audits. We want to be able to come back and share the results. We're learning quite a bit, which is great, and then we're also making adjustments. So definitely want to thank some of our regional support that's here, Gary, as well as Van Dyke, who's been on property helping us adjust the system. Definitely the team that's put in the long hours and trying to get everything coordinated. Of course, to WAPMA for helping us coordinate and move everything along. But with that, thank you very much. Any questions?
Two real quick. So substantial construction all construction will be completed in July?
By the end of July, that's correct.
Okay. And then you're still on track by fourth quarter to be 1383 compliant?
Yeah, so at the end of this audit, depending on the results, we should be rather close, but if we're not there, there's a series of 4 quarters that we need to achieve the SB 1383 audits. But more than likely, if we end up passing this one, there'll be 3 subsequent. The high probability it'll be the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
So, it's been a while since I took a tour. Are large metal objects supposed to be directed somewhere else? And they ended up in the shredder, or what happened here?
Yeah, so periodically, our customers do end up blending and hiding contents within the carts or front load bins, and it gets embedded within the contents, or they bag them up. If we don't identify them during the pre-sort, they do end up going through the system.
Okay. And then odor control equipment? I thought we got the odor handled. Is it back? Has it not performed to expectation?
We've been working through, there's been some challenges. They did install, FCC put up a misting station over the South Pond, which does work, but, you know, there's been a rise in the odor issues, so we're gonna meet next week and see how we can address that.
I mean, there was that situation maybe a couple of months ago where there was an odor detected, but it wasn't coming from the landfill. It was coming off property.
And we still do that. We still investigate every issue that comes in, and many of them are not from us, but of course some could be.
Okay.
And then if I could step in and clarify too, I think what Tony's referring to by the odor control equipment is the specific MRF odor control equipment.
Okay.
Whereas the odor issues that we've been dealing with are primarily compost or landfill based in nature.
Or the pond, right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Perez.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, item 6E, facility projects update.
Thank you, Chair Halden, and good evening, Board. If you took a close look at this memo, it varies a little bit in format than our normal. Normally, the MRF section is large, and we don't have a lot of other things to talk about. But as we near the closing of that project, we're going to transition to more of a punch list update. We're getting down to the point where there's an actual finite number of items that need to be completed and addressed, and hopefully that section just keeps shrinking. And we also added in another section that I'll go into when we get to it. So to start off with the MRF improvements punch list, just to reiterate where we're at with the Firefly system. So they added that to the shredders, and then that was waiting on commissioning. As Tony alluded to, there was the problem with the shredders malfunctioning, which is now fixed, and we can kind of reschedule the commissioning of that Firefly early detection system. And then for the odor control equipment, which I briefly clarified, that's still being complete. There was some openings in the MRF that had to be in the walls that had to be taken care of, which required a lot of structural engineering and design work. Those are complete now, and they can resume the ducting and finishing out the electrical work on those. For the scale, the new scale house next to the new C&D facility. That is complete and is just pending some final testing, and both for the scales and traffic around that area. And we're working with FCC to get that commissioning and also a staffing timeline. There are card reader kiosks that have been ordered, and those will be installed upon their arrival, which has a somewhat long lead time of 18 to 20 weeks. But once we get those, it'll allow for commercial account customers to quickly pass through the scale without dedicated scale house staff other than more of an oversight role. They'll be able to just hit that card reader and get their tare weights and move on. Moving over to the liner investigation, we did receive comments from the water board for our initial remediation plan. We got those on the 18th of February, and then immediately met with our consultant expert to go over those comments, and we're expecting an initial response from them on the 13th. Once we finalize that document, we'll be submitting that right back to the water board for approval, and we'll keep your board apprised of anything that would come out of that final water board response. For the South Placer Wastewater Authority compliance project, we have our signed agreement with Biofiltro for the construction of the pretreatment system, thanks to your approval at the February meeting. And right now we're in that process of submitting the documents to Placer County building permit review. And then as soon as we can get construction going, the better. And we're just working on accelerating that timeline as much as possible. Keeping in note that the final compliance date is October 26th of this year. This next section is the new section that I had alluded to. I would like to, as we move through the landfill process for what we've anticipated to be our final module on this property, just that we keep an idea in our heads of the lifespan and how much time we have to make sure that we react accordingly and proactively with future landfill cells or development. So to give you kind of a background, we began landfill operations in Module 6 in August. And just based on when that happened, we have conducted 2 quarterly aerial surveys to allow us to see the rate that we're filling that module from an airspace perspective, and kind of start to plot those trends. And then using the long-term waste stream growth predictions that live kind of in our budgeting process, we can put those along with the minimum material diversion rates, as well as predicted compaction rates that are in the contract, to develop a couple trend lines. If there is a graph that's on that next page, so we kind of have 3 situations that we're looking at. The first scenario, which would just be, I guess on the bottom it's listed differently. So the pre-construction projection scenario is assuming that when we had started Module 6, we were hitting our compaction values as well as hitting our MRF recovery values. That wasn't the case, but that just shows what we projected the landfill lifespan to be. The next scenario is using what we have done to date and then projecting that out to a date of the end of this year, when we could see us being 1383 compliant and hitting all those diversion and compaction ratings. And then the following the designed projection at that point. And then the third scenario is using just current trends and projecting that out as if nothing would change. Those 3 dates listed would be the end, the final fill dates for Module 6 and the date that we would need to have the last piece of trash in there to move across the street to our next landfill module. So a couple key takeaways is that if the landfill airspace consumption continued at the current rate, Module 6 will be full within 9 years, which is a 4-year reduction in operational life. And then also if both the MSW and C&D guaranteed minimum recycling levels are met by the end of the calendar year, that's as well as compaction, then Module 6 would have a capacity for 12 years and 3 months, which would be a 9-month reduction in operational life. So as we go through, the next aerial survey is going to be at the beginning of next month. So we'll have even more data. We'll be able to kind of drill in these predictions throughout the year. And then each quarter that we run a survey, I'll throw this section in. We'll just revisit it, look at those key points, see how trends are changing, increasing, decreasing, and stuff like that. And then obviously answer any questions that you have.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Is there any way it could get better and last longer, or would that not be possible?
Yeah, no, there's definitely, if we were exceeding those minimum contractual levels and getting compaction higher than the average compaction listed in the contract, then those could get better. And I think as tuning happens, I know that we all would love to see that happen too, and that things get better. This is more to just show how so far in this small period of time there has been an effect, and it's prudent that we move forward to try and change these trends as soon as possible. But not to say that it's all doom and gloom. It could theoretically get better as well. So,
Can I ask for comparison? So the most recent module, right? Is that one, first of all, is it closed? Is it done?
So it's not closed. Partially how you have to fill a landfill module. It's on a slope. So in filling this phase of the landfill, we will touch other modules as well through that filling process. But this kind of volume of airspace that we're looking at is the total combined remaining airspace. So even though I'm calling it the module 6, it's really just this phase. So it's modules 5, 6, 12, neighboring modules.
Okay, so that's what we have, total capacity.
Correct.
Based on diversion rates and compaction.
Yeah, so that
You're
capacity.
still using some of the other modules.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So I think the number, it's not like specifically called out on here, but I think it's about 5.7 million cubic yards. And that's a lot more than module 6 holds on its own. But when you combine the geometry of the areas around it, that's the total space for this phase.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
And then I do want to touch on odors really quick.
Okay. Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it just wasn't the last one. So we are reevaluating our odor mitigation measures, as well as the operational responses to periods of high odor risk, just to ensure that effective measures are being implemented and also properly documented, because we do have the public notification system that we do respond to them, and we always just want to make sure, so kind of performing a self-audit in that area to make sure that the public is happy with the work that we're doing. We are working with FCC regarding intermittent odors. Again, it's kind of that roller coaster. Some weeks it's bad. I didn't smell anything when I came in this morning or the day before, but last week I did. So it's always just kind of fighting that battle and putting as much in our tool belt as possible to deal with that. The misting system has been really helpful in that area. And when we run that during high odor risk times, we definitely see a reduction in odors during that time. We're also looking at evaluating one of our on-site weather stations. That we use that to do that reverse trajectory modeling. we're just kind of auditing the placement of that, making sure that our reverse trajectories are as accurate as possible, so that when we tell the public that an odor came from an off-site source, we're being as accurate as possible and not just pointing fingers down the road. So we're kind of re-looking at some of those things. And then Jacobs Engineering is in the finalizing of their design for additional aeration infrastructure for the South Pond. We're just trying to figure out where to pull that amount of power from to power those aerators. But once that's done, we'll kind of move forward to that next step and keep your board apprised of the next steps. But with that, I'll answer any questions about any of the sections.
Any questions?
Is the Firefly system for the paper dryers or something else?
The Firefly is for the shredders on the tip floor.
And what's the status of the paper dryers getting back online or getting online?
So we do have, we have a meeting scheduled with the fire marshal, FCC, and Van Dyke and WATMA staff to discuss an early detection option that could be installed there, as well as an additional temperature trigger. So trying to reduce the response time of the same deluge system that's in there, reducing its response time from 5 seconds to under 1 second. And this solution that Van Dyke and FCC have come to that they're going to propose to us is supposedly achieves that. And we're just discussing that with the fire marshal, making sure he's good to go with that. And we'll keep you posted on that.
Okay, thank you.
I had one question. Usually you have in your update about is it the final occupancy permit? Is that what we're waiting for from the county? I just was wondering what the.
Yeah, no, and I can re-put that in there. I felt like I was giving the same update every time.
Oh, maybe there's a miracle. But it just is
so we're actually
Okay.
in the process of review for the contract to provide a plat and legal description to the county. That's the final step. And once that contract is signed, it's a 4-week process for them to just write that up, complete the surveying, and then once we send it over to the county, it's just a simple them reviewing it and kind of memorializing it into existence, and then we should be clear from all that.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
With respect to the odors, do you have empirical data that associates it with wind or, time of the day or anything like that? When the earth heats in the morning?
Yeah.
Float?
Yeah, so our odor risk software is looking at all of those weather patterns, both temperature, because as or some people may know, temperature inversions cause odors and other pollutants to stay close to the ground. So we see higher odor risk at that time. And that model does take into account all those weather factors. And that's what's key to making sure that our weather stations on site are accurate and operational so that they're actually giving a valid odor risk projection for the remainder of that week.
I don't know that this is the MRF's responsibility, but there's houses going up down the street and getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
What type of outreach, do those builders?
Yeah, so I know that Emily's had conversations and meetings with the builders to kind of see what responses they're getting from potential customers. We're also obviously have our open house that we just hosted. And I think that's also a partial driver of why we're going through this kind of reevaluation process, making sure that as people get closer, we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard, even though, it may not be our direct responsibility, but being a good neighbor is our responsibility, so.
Yep. I remember the time I lived on a golf course and didn't realize that they did a lot of maintenance at 4:30 in the morning, so.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Any comments from the public on this item? All right, we will move on now to our action items. Item 7A, minutes of the board meeting held February 12th. Any comments or questions on this? Any comments from the public? All right, could I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Director Reedy, seconded by Director Gore. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion passes. Action item 7B, the Circular Economy Innovation Competition.
Yes, thank you, Chair Halden. I'll be handling this for Emily tonight. Despite what Scott tried to lead you to believe, she's not here to answer questions.
I was looking around
I
going,
know.
Yeah, so was
is she
I.
gonna run it at the last minute?
The circular economy involves holographs, and she's
Yeah.
going to appear by,
That's right.
okay.
She'll be attending virtually this evening by holograph. So tonight we are recommending and requesting that your board select up to 2 directors to serve as representatives on the 2026 Circular Economy Innovation Competition Judging Panel. Director Halden and Reedy did this for us last year, and I believe Director Halden has done it every year since we started these competitions. So we are seeking and looking for your board to participate in those panels again, should you wish to do so. A very similar process as what's happened in the last couple of years, but it is worth noting that the exposure of the authority continues to grow every year. This year, we received 196 applications. That's a nearly 5-fold increase from last year alone. We're seeing more applications coming in from international entities, entities across the United States, and of that 196, 58 are from California. So it's a good amount that's coming from outside California and outside this region. Very exciting that we're getting that kind of notoriety, really now globally, for this this effort. So as Scott mentioned, we do plan on having the final pitch competition on April 29th, and the panel would include some other representatives, including those from the Growth Factory. So very similar process to the last previous years. So again, at this point, just hoping to see that your board would be interested in sitting on that panel, and if you'd like to select up to 2 members for that panel.
So I've done this for at least the last 2 years. It's you hear presentations, you ask questions, and then the group meets and chooses the winner. I think the winner gets $20,000.
I believe that's correct, yes.
Yeah, so it's a pretty big thing. So among the directors, anybody like to do it this year?
Well, love to, but the chair of the Board of Supervisors scheduled a special meeting, which I think is budget meetings, budget workshops all day that day
Okay,
and the
all
following
right.
day,
That
so we're
takes the
out.
Right side of the
Yep.
table off, all right? How about you folks over here to the left?
Well, I think you'd be great at it.
I'd love to do it again. It was fun.
Yeah, and I do have a commitment on April 30th that I can't get out of, so.
It's April
It's
29th.
April 29th. Nice try, Bill.
Oh, I thought it was 2 days.
Oh, no, it's just
No,
one
no,
day.
our
One
board.
day, it starts at 11 a.m.
Hold on, let me
Okay.
get a commitment
Starts-
for April 29th.
And last year it was in Roseville.
Yeah. So
same
it starts at
location.
about 11, and you're probably out of there by 1:30.
Okay, let me check, all right?
Okay, go
That
check.
would be, 11, yeah. As long as PCTPA is done, I'll be
Okay.
ready, yeah.
How about you, Director Reedy? Would you like?
Sure, I'd love to do it again, but
Okay.
you wanted to keep
We-
your trend up or your,
No, I like to spread the, spread the wealth here. So
okay,
if I'm bored that day, I'll just stop by and not be a judge.
okay.
All right. So do we need a motion for that, or we just have these 2 represent us?
All right.
Okay, great.
It's them.
Okay, all right. So we have,
Good.
Thank you, gentlemen.
okay. All right, so that's taken care of. And then action item 7C, fiscal year 26-27 budget framework. What we've all been looking forward to.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
Dun, dun, dun.
Before I turn it over to Eric to walk us through this, it'll be a joint effort with a very nicely done presentation. I just wanted to say we're excited about this item, based on the feedback through the budget process last year. We wanted to work on it and present something to the board. with a little different format, a little more involvement before we go back and really put the pencils to paper on the detailed budget. And my staff has done an exceptional job on this, and they have put a lot of work into this. So I really appreciate it. So I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Thank you, board. So I am going to be giving a PowerPoint presentation, and this presentation really is meant to be looked at kind of in concert with the document that is included in your board package this evening. So there's some additional details in the board package, which I will not necessarily get to in the slide presentation, just for purposes of time, but really look at the two together. And please, if there's any questions at any point here, stop me. We'll dive into the details. So for this presentation tonight, I want to have a quick discussion about the objectives. I know that we've kind of talked about that since the last budget period, but it's always good to refresh on those. Talk about the main factors that really influence the development of the operating budget. Talk about our revenue and cost projections, our bond obligations, which tend to, these days be the main driver in how we formulate the budget. Talk about the capital projects and our use of reserves, and then finally at the end, talk about some potential initiatives that could influence the development of this budget and future budgets, and really that's where we want to receive a lot of feedback from your board. So we'll probably go through this and talk about the initiatives and then kind of double back and getting kind of feedback that you may have. So in terms of the objectives, we certainly want to identify those main factors that influence the budget. Won't be any surprise, most of that is tipping fees, but there are other factors as well. We'll talk about the operational and capital cost projections and reserve balances and what goes into making those estimates as accurate as we can. And then again, receive direction from your board on those policies and initiatives to inform the operating budget so that when we bring that back to your board later this year, we're all on the same page about what that budget really means, why it's there, and we're all comfortable with moving forward with it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to give a quick warning about this presentation. And that is that the information that I'm going to be presenting is based on projections for the rest of this fiscal year. Obviously, we have a couple months left. A lot can change through the rest of this fiscal year. As Will noted and as Stephen noted, those tonnages, those revenues could come up, those costs could come up, they could go down. Especially when we get into spring, we'll see an uptick in tonnages, so that could influence some of the numbers in here. And then as we talk about next fiscal year, 26-27, those are based, the numbers in here are based on very rough preliminary estimates of what that budget may look like for factors that we know will generally be applicable. So again, as we go through creating the budget, all that will be refined. So really we should be looking at this as for the purposes of understanding trends and guiding a discussion. And please, as we look through this, and if you'll see numerical precision where I'm talking about down to the dollar, down to the ton, don't take that as a suggestion of greater accuracy. It's just how it's spit out of my spreadsheets. And I wanted to keep everything kind of consistent. I didn't want to start doing a lot of rounding. But don't think that because I say it's, we're down to the single dollar figure on tip fees that I really believe that that's the case right now. Again, this is really just to talk about trends. And these future estimates really reflect a long-term trends that we're seeing at this facility. So they won't necessarily account for any kind of near-term or recent economic fluctuations. So for example, Will and I were talking today that he saw gas prices tick up, I think 60 cents per gallon since he got back from vacation. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world right now that's causing a lot of fluctuations. That's not baked into here. That's not built in here yet, and it may never come to pass. So we're really looking at those stable long-term trends to understand where we're probably heading. So the first piece, we've talked about this many, many times in the past when we talk about tip fees. By far and away, that is our largest source of revenue. So it's really important for us to understand where our money is coming from. So the first piece is looking at it by origin. Nearly 90% of our tip fees come from our member agencies. Not a big surprise, but it is really instructive to see that. And when we talk about the member agencies here, we're really talking about their geographical boundaries. So when we talk about 39% coming from Roseville, that's the city of Roseville hauling. That's also self-haul customers. That's contractors hauling. That's anybody from that origin. So 89% coming from the member agencies. Our participating agencies, which are comprised of Auburn, Loomis, and Colfax, represent about 8% combined. And then the rest is coming from out of county, which also includes Thunder Valley Casino. And so we do get quite a bit of material from them, but then also self-haul customers that may come from Sacramento, Citrus Heights, Nevada County, if it's convenient, and those folks use this facility. Another piece that is interesting to look here at is, you'll recall when we issued the bonds for expansion of the facility, one of the key pieces we needed to do was establish flow commitment agreements to secure those tip fees here. So this pie chart reflects how much of our tip fees are covered by those flow commitment agreements. And so just shy of 70% of our overall revenues are a reflection of those flow commitment agreements from the member agencies. And then that remaining 31% is from non-committed entities. Again, that could be self-haul customers, smaller contractors. I think the piece to take away here is that 31% could go anywhere they want. And so it is really important to make sure that we are the best facility we can be to keep that 31% here, because it's a fairly large chunk. It is also worth noting that that committed number of 69% does still contemplate Roseville being here in its entirety. Roseville does have the opportunity, if it wishes to take some of its material elsewhere. At this point, they continue to bring all their material here, and that is kind of baked into this pie chart.
Can I stop you real quick?
Sure.
So of the 31, 11 was the participating and the 8 and the 3, right?
Correct.
And so the other 20 is between the 4 who basically the sort of drop-in people who aren't committed?
Correct.
Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, that's a nice segue, because that's exactly what the next slide shows.
Well done.
Yes.
You must have read your staff report.
Yeah.
Wasn't in there. Sorry.
And so, to your point, Director Reedy, is the 4 member agencies you see here. It shows the breakdown of what is those tip fees that are based on the flow commitment agreements versus the self-haul customers, the drop-ins, the ones that had the ability and option to go somewhere else that they chose. And it was interesting for me to put these together to see how closely Roseville and Rockland were roughly 80+ % as committed tonnage, and Lincoln and the county were more in the 60% range. Whether that is a reflection of more smaller construction happening, small construction companies, it's difficult to say without diving into the data too much, but it was interesting to see how those two grouped that way. Or maybe it's just a reflection that Roseville and Rockland have a much better grasp on your waste. So,
Before you leave that, yeah, percentages are always percentages. I mean, 80% of $1 million is not 80% of $500,000.
that's
Right.
very true.
So is there a metric that shows volume?
Not in this presentation. And some of the numbers, I know what some of the jurisdictions bring in, so I could give you a sense. But when I started looking at doing actual numbers instead of percentages, and you start to get these very, very small bands for the outliers, and it almost kind of loses something in translation.
That's a satisfactory answer for today.
But for example, I was looking at it earlier today, Roseville, in terms of bringing in municipal solid waste from the Roseville hauling operations, not all the other customers, but essentially the blue band that you see up there from Roseville, was about 108,000 tons. And, looking back a couple slides at that breakdown by jurisdiction, that actually kind of correlates pretty closely too with looking at what the haulers would bring in. So, Roseville represents probably about 39 to 40% of the MSW that's brought in this facility. So that just gives you kind of a sense. But to your point, I'm not showing actual numbers for those tonnages. Okay, so that's the where. Now I want to talk about the what. So looking at tip fees by material type. And so these, the pie chart that you see here with the multitude of different commodities aligns pretty well with the charts that we present to your board each month. So MSW, construction demolition, organics, inerts wood, and you can see here that there's obviously some that are bigger contributor than others. And what we looked at doing is, instead of trying to track the growth rates of all these different materials, let's start to kind of combine them where we can. And so we looked at MSW and C&D as really kind of the same thing. We charge the same rate. It's mixed waste. It requires the highest level of sorting. It really reflects the one big bin system. And one way of looking at that is MSW is the kind of nice, smaller, fluffier stuff, and the C&D is the bigger, kind of rougher stuff. But in the end, it's all mixed waste.
Can you tell me what S&MI stands for?
Oh, yes. Sludge and mixed inerts. Yep. Good question. Sorry, I should have written that out, but use a lot of short-term slang here. So if we do that combination, you'll see, again, not the least bit surprising, considering where we've made investments recently on the MRF, is by far and away the majority of our tip fees come from mixed waste. About 11% come from compostable organics, that's green waste and source separated food waste. About 3.5% from wood and inerts, and then everything else is, 1.3%. It's, without being too cavalier about it, it's almost noise at that point. So when we're looking at preparing the budget, we really need to understand where are our flows going? What do we think the tonnages that will be coming in next year? Because that is our greatest revenue source. So we took these three major commodities, mixed waste, compostable organics, and wood and inerts, and did some longer term projections for them. So looking back 10 years and making some projections of where we think those tonnages will go the rest of this fiscal year and into next fiscal year. So the first one is the mixed waste stream. We've seen pretty consistent growth for a number of years. We saw a bump that is probably reflective of things that happened during the pandemic, people staying at home and doing a whole bunch of home renovations and other things like that, clean outs. And then after that, once people got back to work and back to somewhat normal lives, we saw a drop back down, a slight drop, and then has been relatively flat with a very modest, almost imperceptible increase. And it's really, it's difficult to pinpoint the why behind that. We can make some conjectures of that flattening. Maybe it's partly due to the rate increases that we've had to implement to pay for the facility. Maybe it's other economic pressures and concerns. Maybe it's something else that we just don't even know of, and we'll see a large uptick in the future. But at this point, we're predicting a very modest, almost imperceptible continuation of growth at about 0.2%. You can see that, so nearly flat, but at least not trending downward. That's our best projection at this point.
Any, I'm trying to think of what could cause that. I mean, is our county aging? Does that lead to less waste, or?
Well, it's odd because it's a bit counterintuitive when we believe that the overall region is growing. When all projections have suggested over the next 30 years the population here will double in this region. So when we started plotting these out, I was actually quite surprised to see it as flat as it was. I thought it would actually be starting to tick upward at a 1 to 2% year-over-year rate.
We're using less water bottles.
There we go.
Or,
Yeah.
I mean, there is that
There is source reduction.
source
sure,
reduction, right? Less
Yeah,
packaging, things like that.
yeah.
Absolutely, and that most certainly has an impact. There's no doubt about it. I mean, by way of example, we see far less newspaper in the waste stream anymore.
That's
But we
true.
see far
No
more cardboard.
newspaper, Our magazines.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you see drops in some areas and you see increases in others. And just walking out at any given day on the tip floor, the amount of material that we see would just suggest that this place is continuing to grow, continuing to generate materials. But looking at it in this kind of longer term trend, to see somewhat of a flattening was a bit surprising. However, we are still seeing a slight uptick, and we can, we're projecting that. It would be a whole different story if we saw it kind of falling off the cliff. And we're not seeing that, which is really good. But it is something, as Will went through the charts. Obviously, we're tracking that every month. We're trying to, look into that crystal ball of what does this all mean. The next big one, about 11% of our tip fee revenue comes from compostable organics, again, green waste and food waste. Very similar to the mixed waste, but you see some volatility over the last couple of years. Spikes up, spikes down, and that could be related to weather-related impacts. Green waste is the bulk of what makes up this grouping, and green waste deliveries to the site are really tied to weather conditions. So when we see, big windstorms or really rainy winters and then really warm springs, we'll see a lot more green waste. Drier periods, all that starts to flatten out. And at the same time, there are other facilities in the nearby region that are competitors for this material. And so there's periodically where we see folks taking their green waste to a facility down the road. If they reach capacity or if they have any kind of operational hiccups, all of a sudden material comes back to us. We say that on wood as well. So we're always kind of the backstop operation. If someone else can, try and figure out how to take the material from us, they do it. But when they can't, we end up getting it. Despite all that, we still project at least a modest increase going into next year of about 1%. So no big swings, fairly modest growth, but at least growth again. And then the last category, again, this is a small one, about 3.5% of our waste stream, but it's also extremely volatile part of the waste stream, and probably much more susceptible to those fluctuations of competition and tip fees. And it is really important to note that this group also falls in that 31% of uncommitted tonnages. This is wood and inerts, can really go anywhere. It's not captured in the flow commitment agreements. So this is material that could flee to other facilities, for any number of reasons. There were points where we were having, operational backups and people were waiting in line a long time. So maybe people go to a different facility and decide never to come back. Maybe it's the tip fees went up, they decide not to come back. And then all of a sudden they realize that this is, a nice facility to come to, it's convenient, and they show back up again. So we see this volatility in this stream, but certainly over the last couple of years, we've seen it decline pretty rapidly. And we believe that is very closely tied to the tip fee increases that were implemented for inert materials, starting in July of 2022, where it went from $25 a ton to $60 a ton. That made a pretty large impact for smaller companies like landscaping companies, pool construction contractors, and other smaller contractors that were bringing concrete, soil, and a little bit of wood to us. So we've seen that drop off pretty considerably. Now, one may ask, does it make sense to try and figure out how to lower the tip fees and go back and capture this material? And at this point, I would argue, actually, it doesn't. Concrete and inerts are actually kind of difficult to manage and difficult to market. And so the fact that these materials are dropping off, it does represent a reduction in tip fees, but it also results in a reduction in cost to us and space utilization. We're really better off trying to target the mixed waste stream. I'm sorry, Director Gorey.
Eric, where else, what are the closest facilities where people would dispose versus here?
Yeah, so wood and inerts, Green Waste Solutions right down the street from us, about a half-mile away, does take some of that material.
Right down the way where?
Sorry, like halfway between us and the casino on Athens.
On Athens, yeah.
Oh, no, I didn't know
Yeah.
that. How did I not know that?
But they have limited availability to take some of these materials.
Okay.
So, while they are a competitor, there's probably also other avenues. Soil's a perfect example, is that, you see signs periodically, somebody looking for fill soil. So maybe someone's digging up a pool and the guy goes, hey, I know somebody who will take this instead of paying to take it to the landfill.
Thank you.
So,
Real quick, so the 31% uncommitted, that bracket across all the
Yes.
jurisdictions, what's the makeup of that between these three categories? Is most of it in this one?
that I don't know. That's a fantastic question. I should have anticipated that. I don't know. I would suspect that at least kind of watching customers come in, it's probably fairly aligned with the rest of the projections in terms of most of it still coming from mixed waste, with green waste coming next and inerts third. So I don't think that 31% is necessarily biased more in favor of wood inerts than it is for the others.
So just, I get a sense of this. So if Lincoln's doing a lot of growing, so if a developer is having their own infrastructure come and dump, that's uncommitted, even though it's, because it's basically not coming in a Lincoln marked
Correct.
truck.
Correct.
Even though it's coming from Lincoln, that's, okay. That starts to make more sense now.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of building on both. Okay.
You don't know where it's coming from, yeah.
No, fantastic questions though, and these are the types of things that we're trying to tease out when we're looking at what is going to happen next year and looking at that crystal ball of what would the tonnages be of trying to, figure some of these pieces out. And they're often a little bit more elusive than we would like.
And I would say this also provides good data for outreach and marketing and advertising it sort of narrows down where we might want to focus on based on these uncommitted tonnages. Yeah.
Okay, so moving into what does all this mean? I mean, we've really focused on the tip fees obviously quite heavily because that is a reflection of our revenue. So let's talk about revenues. So this bar chart demonstrates where our revenues come from. And I will preface this by saying that these numbers that I'm presenting here, particularly on the tip fees, assumes no tip fee increase for next year. So these are projected revenues for 26, 27, assuming we do not raise rates. So with that said, roughly 94% of our revenue coming in from tip fees. And just quickly again, just to hammer home the point of where that comes from again, bless you, the dark blue is mixed waste, MSWC&D, the green is the organics, the yellow is the wood and inerts, and the red is basically everything else. That's appliances, that's tires, that's treated wood waste, but small stuff compared to our main bread and butter, so to speak. We do receive money through rental royalties, and we do plan, as Scott has mentioned in previous meetings, we'll be bringing back a contract with Amoresco in the next couple months for beneficial use of landfill gas to take over the Energy 2001 operation. That is reflected in here, the higher royalty rates. But even at that, it's roughly 3% of our overall revenue. There's ample opportunities in the future to boost that side. Are there ways that we could generate more rent and royalties here? And we're constantly exploring that option of essentially diversifying our revenue portfolio. We continue to receive investment income, so all of our reserves are constantly earning, interest on them, as well as our bonds right now. We have to have a certain amount of the bond money sitting aside to pay the debt service in case we're unable to. Not that dissimilar to and you have a mortgage insurance when you first buy a house. That's continuing to generate interest revenue as well. But again, in the grand scheme, it's relatively small. And then we have miscellaneous revenues and grant revenues. Miscellaneous and grant revenues we hope will be larger than what's shown there, but we never want to bank on something that is uncertain. We're always applying for grants, and we're hoping to apply for some pretty big ones this year, but the $30,000 in grants are the ones that we know of at this point. So with that said, based on these projections, we anticipate roughly $54.4 million in revenues coming in next year. And that will be offset, obviously, by some expenses. Not a surprise, majority of the expenses are for MRF and landfill operations, and these reflect what we pay FCC to run the facility for us. And that represents nearly 64% of our operating expenses. Again, I should caveat, this does not include any construction projects, any capital expenditures. This is just operating expenses, and it will be clearer why in the next slide. Debt service behind that at roughly 14.5%, and then labor, consultants, contractors, all the way dropping down. The lowest category at this point for us next year would be payments to the county. I do want to point out the success story here as we've continued to internalize operations, including having brought Stephen on. We're able to shrink that payment to the county. By way of example, about a year and a half ago, our payment just for doing the accounting services at the county was over $900,000. So what we were paying the county was more like about $1.5 million a year. It's dropped down to about half of that.
Crikey. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Good news.
yeah, no, it absolutely is. And it's, as we talk about initiatives, that's one of the things is continuing to internalize and where can we save money by doing things ourselves and being more efficient at it. But we'll get to that. So quickly back up on the MRF and landfill, highlight here that roughly 85% or so is associated with the MRF, about the remaining 15% is landfill. And in that MRF component is the HHW cost as well that Stephen had pointed out. And again, it's not shown here, but just kind of anecdotally, because it is interesting, is it actually costs us more to manage HHW operations than it does to operate the landfill.
HHW?
Household hazardous waste,
Household,
oils,
thank you.
paint, batteries, that is outpacing the cost to operate that full landfill out there,
Wow.
which is just absolutely shocking to me. But at the end of all those expenses, we anticipate expenses about $52.6 million. And highlight those because that really transitions to the next big piece, bond obligations and covenants. So before I step into this, any questions based on that last chart or any of the previous charts? Okay. So, as I mentioned at the top of this conversation, right now our bond obligations and the covenants are really driving how we develop the budgets every year. We have two main covenants that we have to meet. The first one is we have to generate sufficient revenue through the tip fees and interest revenue and all that, but like we showed on the last slide, to pay our operating costs and debt service without the use of reserves. So we have to demonstrate to the bondholders that we're bringing in enough money to pay our debts without dipping into our savings account. So from the last slide, we saw that our budgeted gross revenues for next year, about $54.4 million. Our budgeted expenses, $52.6 million, means a net operating revenue of about $1.8 million. In the black, a little bit of a surplus. That's good. That means that we met that first bond covenant. Very important. The second one, demonstrate sufficient revenue to cover at least 125% of the debt service. And this one, we can utilize our rate stabilization funds to demonstrate that, that metric. So, debt service next year, $7.751 million. 25% of that debt service is just a shade under $2 million. And as you can see, that 1.937 million is less than our net operating revenue. So we would need to utilize our rate stabilization funds, about $175,000, to demonstrate that we meet that metric. It is important to note we don't actually spend that money. All we do is demonstrate that it's there and available and that we can cover that number. So the nice thing is we can use those rate stabilization funds to say, yes, we're solvent, we're good, we meet that, don't have to worry about it. So now it's the first one of generating enough revenues each year to cover all of our operating costs becomes the primary driver of the two covenants. All right. Okay, so, and all the bond stuff is based on just operating revenue, but we all know, and you know, Ryan, this is his, what makes Ryan tick is doing all the capital projects and reserves. So, it's a chart you can see here. We plotted out what our capital expenditures have been over the last decade. And obviously with the MRF expansion, we've had a couple years of some really big projects. Those are winding down, as Ryan noted. And so now we're working on transitioning and focusing on smaller capital projects that are aimed at improving operations. So we have, I think there was, 6 to 8 or so that we listed in the package for your board. And that works out to be roughly $8 million in total capital projects for this year. So, relatively modest compared to previous years. But I will note that that a majority of those costs would need to be covered by the rate stabilization funds or reserves because we don't have a whole lot extra in net operating revenues. But that's okay because we've got the reserves for it. So, the next piece is we're going to move into the initiative. So before we get to that point, I just want to make sure if there's any kind of outstanding questions that answer now.
One quick question. How much do we need to keep in the rate stabilization fund for the bond requirements?
I'll get to that in a second because there
Okay.
really isn't a defined number.
Okay.
The rate stabilization fund is a bit of an interesting element that provides your board quite a bit of flexibility on how it operates in the future.
Okay.
So we'll touch on that in
That's
one of the
fine.
initiatives.
Thank you.
So we have listed 6 initiatives here, and I think if it pleases your board, I'll go through each of them quickly, and then we can come back and discuss after you've kind of thought about them as the, in total, if you have any other initiatives or you want to kind of go back and work through them. So the first one, as we've talked quite a bit about, first initiative is keeping tip fees flat for fiscal year 26-27. As noted in the previous slides, we can meet the bond covenants and operational needs without raising rates. So that's the good news, is your board can decide not to raise rates for 26, 27, and at least in terms of the bonds and how we are looking so far in terms of costs and revenues, we'll be okay. We can do that. Obviously, another benefit of that is it will limit cost impacts to our customers and maintain market competitiveness. Getting back to that 31% of that uncommitted tonnage, uncommitted tip fees, is everything we can do to keep that 31% here, we're going to be better off. So if we're more competitive, that's going to help in that regard. But we always have to understand the flip side of that, is it will require greater reliance on our reserves to pay for any capital projects. There's no two ways around that. It reduces our flexibility to respond to unforeseen issues. That $1.7 million of buffer is a healthy buffer at this point, but you never know what kind of fluctuations could happen that could end up chewing up that money right away. So we would need to be nimble and come back to your board and say, unfortunately, we may need to raise rates effective January 1. Hoping that's not the case, but if we don't raise rates now, we may need to later, or even future rate increases may need to effectively be larger to make up for not doing it now. Now, this is not a recommendation one way or the other. Ultimately, this is just, again, to get feedback from your board of where do you want to spend your money, how do you want to use your money. So we just plant that seed of the pros and cons of each. Next one is establishing a tiered rate structure. I know this concept has come up a couple times of could we reduce tip fees to one or more of the participating agencies if they reach certain thresholds, whether that's bringing in a certain dollar figure, a certain tonnage figure, whatever that may be. And that can be done. The thing to keep in mind is that wouldn't have a commensurate reduction in costs. It would only be a reduction in revenues to the authority. So realistically, we would likely need to raise rates. That may be raising rates on certain material types or to certain customers, or going out and trying to find more tonnage to bring in. So seeing those growth curves start to tick up instead of remain flat. So that's a couple ways that you could do it. Either you raise rates or you bring in more tonnage. The next one, and this gets to your question, Director Gore, is the early retirement of bonds. So you may recall when the authority issued bonds, and I give Director Halden quite a bit of credit for this one, is that you wanted early call dates, and very early call dates on the landfill bonds. So the landfill bonds, our first call date where we can retire all the bonds, pay them back early, would be July of 2027. If your board elected to pay off those landfill bonds at their earliest date, we could save approximately $2.8 million in interest that would otherwise be paid out with no value to us. It's just paying it to those bondholders. We could pay off a portion of the MRF bonds actually technically we could pay off all the MRF bonds in July of 2032 and could save up to $14.5 million in interest. The problem is we're just not on track to have that amount of money in the rate stabilization fund to pay off those bonds. So we are on track right now to be able to pay off the landfill bonds in total, still have money left over in the rate stabilization fund. We would need about another $55 million to pay off the landfill bonds. We're tracking at about $25 million right now. So unless your board really started to jack up rates to pay them off early, we're not in any place to pay them off entirely. We can pay them off in part, and that's something your board can consider as we get closer to that call date on the landfill bonds. And in the end, it becomes a policy decision for your board. Does it make more sense to take those rate stabilization funds in our reserves and reinvest into the facility as we need it? Or at some point in the future, do we try and pay out these bonds? Do we keep our reserves low, realizing that we may need to issue new debt in the future for any large modifications?
Director Reedy, you have a question?
Yeah. So I want to make sure that they weren't landfill and MRF, the bonds. What's the total bond size of the landfill? What's approximately the?
About 8.6 million was the total principal amount, and about 88 million for the MRF.
Okay, so when you said we didn't have enough to pay off the landfill bonds, does that actually mean to pay off the
MRF bonds? I'm sorry, yes,
okay,
I misspoke.
that's what I thought, because I thought the landfill was much smaller. So the July 2027 2.8 is, or the 8.6 in approximately a year and a half is in reach, but the 88 5 years later is not in reach at the current trend.
Correct. And we will have, in each case, we will have paid down the debt to a certain degree. So in July of 2027, we'll owe about 6.8 million on the landfill bonds as outstanding principal.
6 point what?
6.8 million.
And January 27th?
July of 2027. So
Oh,
at
at the
that,
time,
at
okay.
that first call date for the landfill, if we made that call, we could pull 6.8 million and change out of the rate stabilization fund, pay out the landfill bonds, they'd be done, we'd save that interest forevermore.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay.
As of July of 2032, we're projecting that our principal balance will be about $55 million on the MRF bonds. And we're not on track to have enough in the rate stabilization funds to pay that off.
Okay, thank you.
The next one, and this dovetails into this whole idea of generate more material coming to the facility rather than increasing tip fees. So when the facility was proposed and the design was put together, there was the theoretical ability to potentially accelerate the use of the equipment, because there's a certain amount of growth that was built into how much material would be put over the lines in the future. We had a 10-year lifespan of the contract. We knew there'd be growth in the waste stream. So we knew in the early years there would be some excess capacity to the MRF, both MSW and C&D. And we learned from the last major MRF expansion that we did that we overbuilt the capital, we didn't use it, we still tore it out. We lost that value of that capital. So the thinking now is we've got this capital, let's use it while it's there. Let's maximize the use of that equipment investment and get as much revenue back out of that as we can. And that has the benefit of reducing or buffering future rate impacts to our member agencies, participating agencies. If we can generate more revenue and meet all of our obligations, that's going to reduce the necessity for your board to have to contemplate rate increases. See a question there.
But you can process it, get increased tip fees, but then what you go into the landfill reduces your amount in the landfill. I mean, capacity in the modules.
That's correct. It is correct to the degree that how your board would set up how we would handle that material. By way of example, in years past, when your board has contemplated accepting material from outside the county, there's also been a caveat that you take whatever residual back home with you. That's always an option. It probably makes us less marketable, but it is an option. As the charts that Ryan pointed out on landfill capacity, we also believe that if we're able to hit the material diversion targets that are in the MRF contract, we're talking a tripling of diversion rates compared to what we've had in the past. So that really does stretch out our landfill space much more, and at least gives your board the ability to say, okay, hey, we're willing to take in a little bit more from maybe outside the county, and we're willing to use our landfill space a little bit more because the benefit of more value up front outweighs that differential extra consumption in the landfill.
Okay, thank you.
But that is something that your board will need to wrestle with, is because it is a real issue.
And it's a limited commodity.
Yeah.
It is. Not just limited, I mean, once you fill it, it's done.
Right.
And so being able to move next door, we believe at this point we've got 100 years of capacity. But, at some point, 100 years comes to pass. So when we looked at what the theoretical uses of the facility are in terms of how FCC and Van Dyke designed the system for MSW and C&D, and based on where we're at tonnage-wise right now coming through the gate, we theoretically believe we have a significant amount of capacity on MSW. That could handle roughly a Roseville-size entity or a Lincoln and Rockland entities. I mean, that's a big chunk of additional flow. On C&D, we're not even halfway at capacity based on theoretically what we could have. The main limiting factor is organics. So the organics one really isn't affected by C&D, but it is affected by MSW, because a lot of the MSW we're pulling out as organics and then composting it. So if we really wanted to take advantage of this, we would need to make some investments. Now, that's theoretical. Where we're at really right now is that as we struggle to reach substantial completion and really optimize the facility and get the throughput rates that we're looking for, we're actually seeing less available capacity on MSW. Well, we're seeing less available capacity across the board. So there's some pretty big challenges to get to before we could realize this benefit of marketing this unique operation to outside entities. And those include achieving substantial completion, getting the project done all the way, achieving the contractual diversion and throughput rates. That's huge. And then obviously, one of the big marketing elements is being able to demonstrate 1383 compliance. This facility is so unique in that regard. There are so many entities that are dying to come here and help get compliance for their really hard to handle waste streams because of the way that we operate. But we just aren't quite there yet to be able to exploit that. And then obviously, we still need to expand the organics processing capacity. And then getting back to your point, Director Gore, is establishing material acceptance policies, tip fees, operational limitations. How would your board want to monetize this capacity to the benefit of the agency while remaining competitive in the marketplace and benefiting our customers here? So that's something that, you know, we can work on. This is not a tonight issue. It's over a period of time issue. Next major initiative is early development of the landfill across the street. We've talked about this a couple times in the past, so I won't spend a lot of time, but if we can start earlier over there, there is a high potential to be able to market soil to other entities, have them do the dig for us, and either come out cost neutral or come out ahead. But it would mean that we would need to pay a significant amount in biological mitigation fees up front. Our current estimate of that is about $5 million. That is one of the capital projects embedded in that $8 million that I referred to earlier, so we can do this year. But it is making that necessary investment maybe earlier than would otherwise be necessary. Again, so that's something your board needs to contemplate. Do you want to spend it now and hopefully get a benefit by bringing in somebody to do the work for you for cheaper? Or do you want to push that cost down the road a little bit and maybe miss out on that opportunity?
Yeah, this is important to say that that money has to be spent at some point, obviously. So if you spend it now, you have the potential to make money, but it could be decided to be put off. So,
Where is, I know the west landfill is west, okay, I
Right.
got that,
Yes.
yeah,
all right. Where is it in relation to the joint public safety?
It would be immediately north. So the
Okay.
the Regional Public Safety
So
Training Center would
as
be
Athens
just-
tees into Fitterman here,
Across the
Yes.
street.
across the street?
Yeah.
Yes, across the
And
street.
north
Yeah.
toward Lincoln, okay.
Yes. So
And-
the high power lines that bifurcate our property, the training center would be south of that. We would start just north of that.
And are we receiving any lease payments for that land currently?
For the public training center?
no,
That one?
for the
No,
the
for,
firm.
Oh, yes, we do. We do receive payments from City of Lincoln. I think we receive about $60,000 a year in rent.
so that 5 million you talked about is a net number? Of
It-
5 million in
Right, so we would pay the Placer County or Placer Conservation Authority the $5 million to help permit through that to mitigate for any
Gotcha.
wetlands, that sort of thing.
thank you.
All right,
I know, I read that, I was
Guys
like,
getting all the money.
oh. I know,
Are you part of that? Yeah.
all three of us,
All three
actually,
of
the
us.
three of us sit on that board.
Yeah.
We just wait it, no, just.
all right, we got that on the record, right?
I don't have an opinion.
All right. Last initiative is, as mentioned earlier, is the ability to internalize select operations where possible. We've already started doing this in some cases, but there's really just, it's a unique opportunity that we have at this point to reduce our costs associated with facility design, construction, operations. Ryan has taken a greater lead on doing the design work internally instead of subbing that out to consultants. Will and his team, one of them shown right here, doing some of the construction work on site. We've already, we've had some operations like some of the rework of the closed modules where Will and his team did that work, and it probably cost us, a half to a third of what it would cost otherwise, and did it in a fraction of the time. So there's just such a great opportunity at this point to where we can do operations on our own and not farm that outside. We'd be using internal staff here that, not casting any shade on any contractor or consultant out there, but this is our home. I mean, it's, we have as staff here such a commitment to this operation that we would always be committed to doing the best work possible. But it also means that we've got to require, hiring additional staff and trying to find a home for those staff. Obviously, your board has experienced parking challenges coming to these meetings before. Staff would have the same issue, trying to find office space. All those things associated with bringing on more staff would be a challenge, but we believe in the end would be more than compensated for by the value that those extra staff would bring.
Lot of opportunities in this area, and just to note, that is JP, who I referenced last month, our injured employee, in the slide there.
Very much pre-injury. He's
Yeah,
not standing that
pre-injury.
tall right now. And JP's probably listening tonight, so we'll give him a shout out.
He is.
So with that, and I'm happy to go back to any slide that your board would like to see again. This is where we really see turning it back to your board for a discussion to help provide some guidance to staff of what are these initiatives do you like, do you want us to pursue? What are some that maybe we didn't identify you'd want us to pursue? What are some that you say, like, you're going down the wrong path, don't do that, don't focus on that right now? That will really help us formulate the next phase of the budget, which we could bring back to your board and kind of that next phase of development and get some feedback before we bring it back for approval of the actual budgets in May or June. So with that, I'll turn it back to your board.
Wonder if we should start with comments or questions?
I have a comment and a question,
Okay,
so whatever you want
We'll
to.
start down, we'll mix it up.
Okay.
We'll start with
Okay.
Director Landon.
My comment first was in your reference to people wanting to come visit. I was at the National Association of Counties Conference a couple weeks ago and was just in a group of other supervisors from around the country. And one gal from San Benito, I don't even remember how we got on the topic of landfills, but she said, "Wait, are you from that place that has the robots and all the cool things?" And I'm like, "Yes." And so anyway, they had come on a tour
Yeah.
from their county. I just thought it was really cool. So that was my one comment. But I did want to ask about compatible manufacturing. I didn't see that in the slides. So is there what kind of potential is there for having those kind of partnerships?
Those are constantly being explored, and as we had talked before, we're looking at what we can do on site with our current property, but the bulk of that obviously is going to be on the eastern side, eastern property, which will require a significant amount of mitigation fees
Yeah,
and
okay.
infrastructure. So we are continuing down that path, watching what happens with the properties to the west of there regarding infrastructure, so we can maximize the time it right, where we can minimize what we're spending, but bring in compatible technologies to utilize that land and generate revenue and save landfill space. So,
Yeah, can you remind me from between Foothills and the landfill, there's another property owner there, right?
there's Buzz Oats and there's Procter &
Right,
Gamble.
oh yeah, Commerce
Yeah.
Center.
Yeah.
And then a property,
Procter,
and
yeah.
then us.
Yeah.
Okay. That's it for now.
Director Gore?
So question, you had a list of capital cost projections, right, a whole bunch, right, which end up being about 8 million, correct? And I think my now that I'm looking at it, my one question is the Western Property Planning and Development Western, never mind. So there is potential, though, for people out there who want our fill, correct? With
Yes.
construction taking place in the area, there are people who could use our landfill, our dirt, yes, okay, so that's good, right?
Yeah.
And the question is, how much and can we benefit from it? But to that point, like, we're gonna have to pay the mitigation fees, and if we can actually benefit by having somebody pay us for the dirt versus us paying the dirt, I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, so
Maybe we
just-
can make a deal with Placer County PCA and to do it over time. Literally, we could talk about doing fees over time, but.
And
just
Ryan
a
has
thought.
some information on that.
Oh, go ahead. Ryan.
Yeah, I can kind of go into to think about the scale of what benefits leasing that soil would be. So the interest is 100% there. I get calls weekly from
Okay.
different construction companies just
Great.
about import soil in general. And I've kind of given them that forethought of, hey, would this even be an interest to you as a contractor in this area? If we were to kind of format our soil borrow pit in this way, and every single one has said, oh my gosh, we would 100% be interested in doing something like that. So I know the interest is there. And even if it was in a net neutral sense where they just have the soil for free, we would already be saving. Actually, because we'd be doing 2 modules at once to make construction easier, we'd be saving $16 million in just the first phase of that landfill for that excavation.
That is,
so,
those numbers help me a lot.
yeah.
So thank you. I appreciate that. As far as initiatives and priorities, I mean, I love the idea. I know Bill probably loves the idea of no tip fee increase. What was our increase this past year?
2.5. It was either 2 or 2.5.
2.5.
Right, we had talked about that being the amount over a couple of years, correct?
Correct. That was in the budget, or the bond pro forma.
Right.
Was doing a 2.5% for a couple of years and then ramping it down to 2 and then down to 1.
Okay. And so what's your projection if we were not to do a tip increase currently for this year, right? There is a potential of a larger amount in the future, but if we were to not do it this year and maybe we needed to do more next year, it could be 2.5. Do you anticipate it having to jump dramatically if we didn't do it?
No, I do
Okay.
not at this point. I would project that it'd probably be in that 2.5 to 3% range. But it would certainly be then dictated based on actual events that are happening during that time period. But that it would be the projection right now. It wouldn't have to double.
Because we don't have money set aside for additional capital projects. We have the rate stabilization fund, I understand that, but if we were to increase like 1%, that might give us money for capital projects.
Correct.
And this means we are taking the money from the rate stabilization fund, which brings that 25 million down by 8 million.
Correct.
Okay. I think, let me just look. Those are my questions. Joe, just the only last question on the initiatives and priorities, number 6, internalizing staff. I think, I'm certainly not opposed to it. I know that consultants typically, it costs more a lot of times depending on the type of service for consultants. And I think for me, I look at it and go, as long as our long-term liabilities with an employee don't go out of whack, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these new employees will not be PERSable employees, but we will have some type of 401k, et cetera, for those employees. And I just always want to keep my eye on the balance there. So as we're doing that, I just want to have numbers.
Correct, yeah.
Great.
And I do believe that we put a rough estimate into the
document.
budget package in terms of what each of those positions, kind of a range of costs for those positions. Yeah, $125,000 to $175,000 per person per year. And at least what we have seen on some of the work already, that would be paid off. You know, we would save more in a year than that expenditure.
Thank you.
But it is absolutely something we would keep a close eye on. We wouldn't want to just have it later and realize that, you know, we went the wrong direction in that cost picture.
Yeah, to tease that out a little more, Director Gore, the employee JP, that 1 year of having him on staff conservatively saved us about $300,000 in amounts that we would have to farm out for prevailing wage work, consultant, contractor type work to get it done in the time frame it got done. So we've seen a good cost savings and a good early win with this process to internalize some things.
Thank you, Will. That's what I want to hear. Appreciate it.
If I could also jump in there too. Throughout this next year, Eric did mention that a lot of those capital projects we will be doing internally whenever possible. We'll be tracking all of those, you know, at a really micro level to make sure that we keep track of all our internal employee labor hours and can apply that and give, hopefully after this year, a really accurate picture of what it looks like to do things internally versus externally.
Thank you.
Director Hodeschild.
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand something. So in the, where am I? In the revenue side. I think this actually goes back to, actually goes, not on that. Goes back to the earlier PowerPoint or the earlier presentation. So the revenue includes or does not include liquidated damages?
It does not. It does not purposely because we're not banking and budgeting on our operator to not meet their performance obligations.
But in the budget presentation earlier, I know, I was looking, and I was go, do we really have a 2,416% deviation? And then my accountant here pointed out there's significant liquidated damages in that 700,000.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true.
And where does it factor into all these scenarios?
So in the chart that's shown up here right now on your screen, this is for next fiscal year. So those liquidated damage assessments are revenue to the authority, savings, but sit in this fiscal year of 25-26, so they wouldn't be projected into next year.
But could they be?
Yeah, but
Could they
Yeah.
be? But, you know, and I will say that, yes, FCC had some rough periods where there were significant liquidated damages that had been assessed. That was really a blip, and we have seen a dramatic change going forward, which is really what we want. We don't want to be generating revenue.
I just wanted,
Yeah.
I'm just doing math here,
Yeah.
so
No,
I just want to make sure that I understand, you know.
Well,
I mean-
and to that point, when I mentioned that the grant revenues and the miscellaneous up there, and that's where the liquidated damages would sit,
Okay,
you know, typically we see higher actuals in those two categories than what we've shown, but they're speculative at best.
okay, thank you.
Director Reedy.
Yes. So first, I want to thank you for all the work. Year over year, last year's process to this year's process, night and day. I feel much better prepared and understand what's going on with the way you guys rejiggered this, so I'm very appreciative.
That's the new board members. Yeah.
Matt? No, I just thank you for the job. The only suggestion moving forward I would make, and it kind of relates to the thing, is to the extent to which, and not nearly to this level of detail, but some multi-year forecasting would be helpful, because I think that helps on the you know, what do we give up today for tomorrow kind of thing, the question that Director Gore asked. So just real quick feedback on the initiatives and priorities. I think on the tip fee increase, obviously you'd love to not have to increase it. There are other things I'd like to know before making that determination. I don't know about the tiered rate structure, how excited or motivated I am by that. I'm definitely motivated by the retirement of bonds. I think one of the things to understand there is the MRF bond feels out of reach. And I think it'd be useful to know that the only way that would be in reach is if we had 4 or 5% increases, and you know, that's the only way to reach that, to understand whether that's even an attainable goal or not. Some rough approximation of, if we made a priority, we have the landfill in range, but the MRF isn't in range, this is what you'd have to do to get the MRF in range, so we could understand the magnitude of that. If that's a 0.5%, that might be worth it because of how much interest we'll save, but if it's 2 or 3%, that may tip some decisions there, at least for me. I like the idea of keeping our options open on the outside flow. I think one of the things that would be useful for me to understand is once things are sorted out later this year, hopefully with the MSW and C&D MRFs, organics is clearly the limiting factor. So even if you get all that stuff straightened out, you don't have enough capacity in the organics to bring in a whole lot of MSW from another jurisdiction. I think it'd be useful for me to understand what you have to do to widen that part of the pie chart.
Yeah.
We have to do this, 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 and this, and this is the timeline, this is the cost. That would then lean back into me on the tip fee increase to understand how to facilitate that and the timing for that, at least for me. I tend to agree, and I'm not going to negotiate with myself on the PCA side of things, but I would say, I think I lean towards the do it sooner rather than later, and if you want to talk to others about maybe there's some flexibility there might be. And obviously, I support the internalization of operations as appropriate. Thank you very much.
Chair Holden, can,
Director Hodeschel, take two.
yeah. So this says retire bonds, is in the word retirement, what's the word? It was just
Refunding?
refund, not refund.
Pay them off.
Refinance,
Yeah.
refinance. Is that implied in the retirement, or is this, and what are the interest rates on the various bonds?
I really don't know enough about if refinancing the bonds, if that's an option, if it would be advisable, anything else. To this point, we've simply
Sure.
looked at, because our rate on the bonds is 3.7%, so
It's really good.
it's really good.
It's 2.7?
3.7.
Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
well, get
yeah.
two.
So, it may not make any sense to try and refinance, but, I think the idea has always been,
Executive order.
and going back to that slide right
Yeah.
there where, almost 15% of our expenditures are debt service right now. Is there a way to reduce that by paying off those bonds early and saving that interest rate? Obviously, we'd pay back the principal, but we could avoid paying a certain amount of interest.
Yeah.
And so then it's a balance of, to Director Reedy's point, and I appreciate that feedback of what would you have to do to be on track to pay out those MRF bonds and give your board that information. And that's the kind of feedback we're looking for, so we can bring that back at a subsequent meeting and say, all right, we weren't looking for an answer tonight, we were looking for direction. And that was the kind of direction, is like, all right, we can bring that back as, here's what we would need to do to be on track, and your board could say, no way, let's try and target for 50% or 75% or whatever it may be. But at least then you'd have the information to make that value judgment.
And I'm just gonna try to clumsily frame this question. In 2020, 2021, I think I was on the South Placer Waste Management Authority, and interest rates went there. And so there was a moment in time, might have been April of 2020, in which interest rates were very attractive and refinancing happened. Should that happen in the next 9 months? Could we do that?
I would certainly have to talk with our bond counsel to understand that, because now I'm way out of my league on
Sure.
answering that.
No, no, I just want
I
to,
think
But they are
Throw it in there.
questions.
Director Hodeschel, I don't think we could, we've got this small group that's callable after 5 years, so in
Okay.
July of next year. So we can call that, and when we do that, we're gonna reduce our interest expense. So
Okay.
that's a savings for us.
Mm-hmm.
But because the other ones are callable in 10 years, I think we are frankly stuck till they're 10 years to be able to call them
think so.
Correct.
back,
Yeah.
because those people have locked in basically 3.7% for
Great.
10 years.
Probably some penalty.
I feel better that I've asked the question. And
Yeah.
Thank you.
now, yeah, so thank you.
I had a quick question, if that's okay.
Sure.
You don't get to ask yet.
Sorry.
We're asking more questions.
Sorry, the joy of being chair.
That's right, yeah.
I just wanted to ask on the outside flow, if you were to have come to an agreement with some other entity or agency to bring in their materials, do you typically have a multi-year commitment for that? So if we started to see, okay, well, we're actually getting more than we thought, and we didn't want that agreement anymore, how long of a commitment would you typically have to make on something like that?
We would make a commitment that provided enough flexibility for us to pull that back if need be. That's just one of, we can't jeopardize our member agencies, flow coming in. So those would have to be negotiated. But, these new franchise agreements might be 10 years. So we're not going to lock into 10 years without having the ability to exit that if we need to. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'll just say I pretty much agreed with everything Director Reedy said. I actually really like serving on boards with him because he just gets into the weeds so much that I just think it's great. So thank you for digging in so much, because I pretty much
green waste.
agreed with everything he said on direction side. Okay,
All right.
sorry.
Okay.
Go
I
ahead.
have one more.
Chair.
So-
I have one more.
Gore 2.0.
Oh,
It's my turn,
Or-
but Director Reedy brought up the point of forecasting, right? So we're looking at maybe $8 million in capital. expenses this year. And, you know, we obviously have done a whole lot of work of late, so I don't anticipate a lot more capital expenses. But I think that's the other thing we would want to know is like, what other capital expenses do you foresee in the future? Just so that we're paying attention to those, and I'm sure we've got some sort of like plan for maintenance, for maintenance and vehicles and replacement.
Compost expansion and.
Yeah, right. I think it'd be helpful just to keep our eye on what
Yeah.
those capital expenditures are forecasted into the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that Ryan and I have been talking about, because in our financial forecast in the budget, it does have the real big ticket items that we know, like landfill expansion. You know,
Right.
we project when are we gonna need to build the next module. That's usually the big ticket price, and planning that out ahead. But Ryan and I have talked about really putting together a very comprehensive capital improvements plan that we can bring that back to your board and discuss, approve, all that. And then that gives us, again, that roadmap for here's where we're going to be over the next couple of years, and making sure we've got reserves to pay for that. Or if your board says, no, let's, we're better off issuing debt for this one again, whatever that may be, but at least, again, your board is making an educated determination on that.
That is great. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah. So, just some general thoughts. As the general manager knows, I'm a big fan of no tip increase for this next year. And the reason is we have shocked the system with our tipping increases for the last 5 years. And shocking the system means shocking the budget of Roseville, shocking the budget of Lincoln, and shocking the budgets of, homeowners who are paying these garbage fees that are much higher than they were 5 years ago. So if we can see a path to pause our tipping increase and to be more competitive, I think that's something that we should take up. I also look forward, I should say looking ahead to July 2027, where we pay off this first group of bonds that had a 5-year call, that, by doing that, we're going to be dropping our ongoing interest expense. And so hopefully that gives us the latitude to manage future tipping increases. And, I always like to keep in mind, if we're using the rate stabilization fund for capital expenditures, that's okay, because it's stabilizing rates, which is what it's supposed to be doing. Because if we were increasing tipping fees to cover capital expenditures, and then looking forward, I see, when we get to 2032, the ability to pay off what we can pay off without stretching ourselves too thin. If somehow the interest rates at that time call for us refinancing, then let's go and, refinance at that point. But I'm also cognizant of the fact that, if we increase tipping fees now, like to get all the things so that we can pay it off, we're basically burdening today's residents with the long-term cost. And so, as opposed to, spreading that cost over a longer period of time. So, and then I think, looking for new revenue opportunities, always a good idea. I do think I think everybody's in agreement. We need to have this place running to meet the expectations of our agency members before we take on any more volume or anything like that. So,
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
First things first.
yeah, exactly. Those are my thoughts. So, all right. Any other thoughts before we? And you don't need a vote or anything on this. This was just a discussion item. Yeah.
Chair Halden, it would be a good idea, though, to just make sure the public had an opportunity to comment.
Oh, yes. Of course. I was just about to do that.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. Would any member of the public like to make a comment at this time? Our public has thinned.
I don't blame them.
so Chair Halden, this is an action item, but do you
It's-
need the action to determine that this is not a project pursuant to the CEQA? Do you need that tonight, or,
No,
okay?
you don't.
Okay. Yeah.
Could you forward the slide deck too?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was great slide
Yeah,
presentation,
and
by the way.
thank you. Like, as Director Reedy said, well done. Really great job.
And I think we have enough to move forward and present to, we can present to the board in between meetings individually to sort of make sure we're still heading down that right path before we come back with a more detailed plan, budget.
All right, we'll move on to item 8, reports from directors. Do any of the directors have a report?
No.
Okay. Item 9, upcoming agenda items. Are there any items that any board member would like to see added to a future agenda?
When is our next meeting?
What's that?
When is our next meeting?
April 9th, Thursday.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, great.
I
All right.
am not here April 9th.
Yep. So item 10, adjournment, and I'll use the gavel for that. So thanks, everybody, for being here. Thanks.